Good morning. Hope you and your family are all doing well. Thank you for choosing to worship with us this morning through this weird way of worship, but we appreciate you clicking and joining in. This morning I want to talk about something that we actually talked a little bit about in our last sermon. If you remember in the last sermon, we talked about Jeremiah and Ezekiel. But one of those verses, Jeremiah 29:11, is a pretty common one. And we talked about a little bit of the background for that verse, but I wanted to start with that this morning. For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. Now, he was talking to the Israelites in their setting, in their situation. But I think that last part is what I really wanted to focus in on for this morning. That idea of hope. What is this hope that God has for us? What is it that we as Christians have when it comes to hope? That's what I want to look at this morning. When you look around at the world around us and this pandemic going on and all of these things where a lot of people lose their hope and their hope is very situational, I want to look at this more in depth to see what exactly our Christian hope is all about. When I think about hope, there's a couple of kind of funny scenes or movies that come to mind. The first one is actually Lego Movie 2. And I realize not a lot of people like or have the opportunity to watch those kind of movies. I know with 3 young kids, I watch probably more than I ever want to. But there's one character in there, Emmett. And in the second movie, it's kind of this dystopian universe. Everybody's almost like, dressed in leather and it's all burned down and apocalyptic and everything is a mess. But for some reason, Emmett just seems to have this glow and this hope about him. Everybody else is all despair and doom and gloom, but yet Emmett seems to always have this pep in his step and always seems to have this hope. Now for him, that's a naive hope. It's almost like he's unaware of all the bad in the world and he just chooses to only look at the good. I don't think that's what our Christian hope is. Well, then the second thing that I think about is actually an episode of The Office. There's an episode where there's actually 2 managers, Steve Carell and Jim, the character. They're both managers, and they find out that the branch could be closing, and everybody just wants to stop work, and everybody has their different reactions to this bad news. But essentially what we see is that the 2 managers have 2 different ways of dealing with this negative thing that's going on around them. One just wants to work hard and just work his way through it and not think about it and just put his head down and do what he's got to. And then Michael, the other one, he wants to have fun, play a game, distract people. When you think about those 2 things, one is just wanting to distract from the bad and in that way kind of maintain hope. And then the other one's really just wanting to deflect. But nonetheless, still, they don't really have hope in that situation. They may be finding ways to keep their spirits up, but their hope is very circumstantial. Well, this morning I want you to turn to Romans chapter 8. We're going to spend most of our time here. I'm going to read some other verses, but I'm going to have those pop up on the screen so that you won't have to flip there each time. But if you want to go to Romans chapter 8, that's where we're going to spend most of our time. And I want to read through this and then we'll go back and we'll draw some points from it. Romans chapter 8, starting in verse 18. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope, that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. And not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for adoptions as sons, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we were saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope. For who hopes for what he sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. Romans chapter 8 is one of my favorite chapters really in all the Bible. And it's just filled with so many pictures of this hope. So many uplifting things that for us as Christians really need to keep in our mind. Well, when you start with this passage, he starts with this idea and sufferings of this present time. Now, when I read that, you could almost think, man, that's, he's talking exactly about this situation. We think about the sufferings, people dying, the frustrations that many people feel. We very well, at least in this point in our lives, may be experiencing on a global scale the best understanding of this. You think about for the time of writing in Romans, though, for many of these Christians, they were facing persecution. They were facing people that were staring them down because of their faith and saying that they wanted them killed. And in many situations, they were being killed for their faith. But this idea of sufferings, it's not a word just for persecution, but instead, it's for the totality of what we deal with as human beings. Think about the thought of losing a loved one, or dealing with hunger in different parts of the world. Think about the financial struggles that we have, or the consequences of evil in our world, the bad things that are just tragedies that we wish would never happen. And then finally, that illness and death that all of us at some point in our life will deal with. This is what he means by the sufferings of the present time. So when we think of those sufferings, very much that is exactly what we are dealing with in this world today. But why I wanted to look at this verse is because of how that sentence finishes. He says, it's not, the sufferings of this time do not worth comparing with the glory to be revealed in us. He says, whatever it is that we go through this difficult pandemic, through these difficult circumstances, from all these difficulties that we face in our life, no matter how bad it gets, he says that it's not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed to us. You know, you think about just other situations when you compare the sufferings of something with its rewards. You know, the first thing that comes to mind for me is working out. You think about the suffering of sweating and agonizing, of pushing yourself to the limits, and you work hard, and yeah, the rewards are good, you know, to be healthy and to be fit and to look nice and all those good things. But think about how quick that goes away. You know, for many people in the world, with gyms being closed, they're going to quickly see how easily you can lose all of those gains that they made in weightlifting and different things. Those rewards really don't compare. And maybe it's a 1-to-1. Put a number to it if you want, but it's not really on the level that Paul is talking about here. Think about jobs. You put in hours and hours each week, and some jobs may have great pay, some may not. Some may have good benefits, some may not. But even the best jobs with the best pay and the least amount of work of hours, even those people find their money running short. So, no matter how much money we accumulate and collect, that can still be a reward that very much may not even be as good as the sufferings, or it's very much worth comparing. Is it worth my time putting in all this effort for those rewards? Because those rewards are temporary. Think about eating healthy. You know, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're going to live longer. Think about reading books. Think about studying. You know, they have benefits, yes, but even those benefits are limited. All of the positives of these things, they are worth comparing to the time and the effort and the sufferings that you're going to go with getting it through. Think about people who have degree after degree and can't find a job. They understand that some sufferings are worth comparing with those rewards, because it's wise to make that decision and say, hey, is it worth it to put in this time and this effort? But here Paul says, for the Christian, whatever sufferings we face, it's not worth comparing to the glory that will be revealed to us through God. And I want us to look at that. And you're going to see him exchange. There's really two ideas that you can trace through this passage. There's actually a couple different ones, but the two main ones I see are glory and hope. See, glory is this thing that God is going to reveal to us, as he says in this verse. It's going to be revealed to us. We're going to see this, but also this is the hope that we put in. When you go down to the later verse in that, verse 24, he says, for in this hope we were saved. All that we're going to talk about, he says it's this that we were saved in. It's this that brought us to Christ. It's this that we put our hope in, is this glory that will be revealed. And I want to look today about the three solid, tangible aspects of this hope that we have, of this glory that will be revealed. See, unlike the Lego movie or The Office, we don't have to base our hope on naivety or distraction, but instead our hope can be built on very real promises that God makes to us. The first one I want to see, Paul doesn't necessarily elaborate it here, but I think anytime we talk about the glory of God, I think it's something we've got to consider, and that's God's presence. When we think about the glory revealed to us, as he says, that God, one day, we're going to see Him fully. We're going to be able to see and experience His presence. No matter what we do in this world, even Moses on Sinai, it was still a limited experience. When you look in Exodus chapter 33, starting in verse 18, Moses had spent time on the mountain with God. He had spent time talking with Him and God revealing things to him. But even in verse 18, Moses says, "Please show me your glory." He realized there was more to see of God. There was more to experience, even compared to what he had already experienced. And he says, "God, please show that to me." God says in verse 19, "I will make all of my goodness pass before you and will proclaim before you my name, the Lord. And I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and I will show mercy on whom I will show mercy." But he said, "You cannot see my face, for man shall not see me and live." And the Lord said, "Behold, there is a place by me where you shall stand on the rock. And while my glory passes by, I will put you in the cleft on the rock, and I will cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will take away my hand, and you shall see my back, but my face shall not be seen." God says, look, I'm going to show you my glory, but I can't show you all of it because no human can see it and live. And see, when we think about this idea of the glory that will be revealed to us, one day we will experience the fullness of God's glory. We will experience the fullness of God's presence. Even Moses realized there was more to be revealed and more to see. When we read last week Psalm 27, verse 4, even the psalmist, this was one of the things that he desired. He said, "One thing I have asked of the Lord, that I will seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, and to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord, and to inquire in His temple." The psalmist says, look, I want to see the beauty of the Lord. I want to see all that can be revealed of His glory. I want to be in His presence. I want to be there in the house of the Lord. This is something that many godly people look forward to. And for us, that is the hope that we have, to experience God's glory in its fullness. Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 3 says, "And we all with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit." Paul says as we walk on this earth, we experience more and more of that glory. We become more and more like God. And there is always more to see. There is always more to experience of God's glory and of His presence. And here in our passage in Romans 8, that's one of the things that I believe we look forward to. That's one of the glories that will be revealed to us. That's one of the things that we put our hope in, is that we will experience that fullness of His presence. That's the first thing that I think we put our hope in. The second thing starts in verse 20. I want to read those again. It goes like this: "For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of Him who subjected it in hope, that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now." I want you to look at that phrase in verse 20. The creation was subjected to futility. You know, all that God created. At the end of it, He said it was good. But because of sin, because of failure for us to do God's will and obey His commands, it was subjected to corruption. It was subjected to futility. All of the creation that's around us, every good thing that God created, was put under this corruption, this futility, because of our sin. I want you to hear what the writer of Ecclesiastes says in chapter 1, starting in verse 1. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. "Vanity of vanities," says the preacher, "vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever." You know, just think about that. Even though we may experience, and the writer of this experienced this sense of vanity, that we work, and where does it all go when we die? The earth has been dealing with generation after generation after generation of this. The earth was subjected to this futility, and it watches it goes on and on. Verse 5, the sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. He says, look, the sun comes up and it rushes down to where it goes down. And this happens day after day after day. Verse 6, the wind blows to the south and goes around to the north, and around goes the wind. And on its circuits the wind returns. The wind just comes and goes here and there and everywhere, and yet it's always back. It's always back to where it started. Verse 7, all streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, they will flow again. The streams never run dry. The sea is never full, but yet this happens over and over again. Verse 8, all things are full of weariness, and a man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. No matter how much we see, no matter how much we hear, we still want more. Verse 9, what has it been, it will be. And what has been done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it should be? See, this is new. It's already been in the ages before us. It says, look, it's all been done before. On some surface level, on some foundational level, it's all been done. We've experienced it all. It's all been done before. He says, look, the world is just caught in this loop of things happening over and over again. Verse 11, there is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. You know, you just think about that. It's weird to think as we're going through it, but there will come a time where less and less people remember the pandemic of the coronavirus. There will come a time where less and less people will remember the sacrifices that people made to save other people's lives. There'll be less and less people to remember all the details that we're living through right now. He says this creation was subjected to futility, to vanity. Everything around us is stuck in this loop of going over and over and over again. You think about the creation itself and how our presence as humans even puts a stress on that. Think about animals that are going extinct. Think about the pollution in the atmosphere. Think about all the corruption that we as human beings are putting on the earth. But see, even that creation longs for the day when it will be reborn. Isaiah 65 verse 17, for behold, I create a new heavens and a new earth, and the former things shall be not remembered, nor come into mind. Revelation 21:1, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. Paul's saying here that even creation itself is looking forward for that day when God in His glory will reveal and renew everything. The creation itself will be reborn and renewed. As verse 21 says, it'll be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. It's been groaning, verse 22, together as in the pains of childbirth until now. Creation itself is waiting for that day when it will be renewed, and it looks towards it eagerly. So the second thing that we hope for is that even the world around us, the creation that we see that's wasting away, that struggles to keep up with the demands that human puts on it, that will be redone. It'll be recreated. There'll be a new heaven and a new earth. That's the second thing that we look forward to. The third thing is in verse 23. And not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies. The third thing we look forward to is adoption as sons. Now we know from reading Scripture that this adoption has already taken place. We're already brothers and sisters with Christ. We are already part of that family. But there's parts of that just aren't completely done yet. We don't see our Father face to face yet. We haven't got to that fullness of His presence and His glory. Just think about this idea of adoption that, we were fatherless, motherless. Yeah, sure, we may have had a physical father or mother, but what do we die? What about after that? Who is our eternal Father? Who is that one that cares for us beyond when our parents pass? See, we have a Father that lives forever. We have a Father that loves forever. And He is adopting us as sons if we obey His will. We're looking forward to the day when that is totally completed. We look forward to the day when we go from owning nothing in this world to having everything in this world because of God and what He's done for us. He's done so much for us, and we look for the day when that's finalized. And the second part of that is we have to have a new body. If we're going to experience the fullness of God's presence, the fullness of His glory, we have to do that with a new body. Look at 1 Corinthians chapter 15. I'm going to read verses from this, but I want you to see this idea that this body must change. For us to experience the fullness of God's presence and the fullness of His glory, something has to be done with this flesh that we experience. Starting in verse 39 of 1 Corinthians chapter 15. For not all flesh is the same, but there is one kind for humans, and another for animals, and another for birds, and another for fish. There are heavenly bodies, and there are earthly bodies. But the glory of the heavenly is of one kind, and the glory of the earthly is another. There is one glory of the sun, and another glory of the moon, and another glory of the stars. For stars differ from star in glory. So it is with the resurrection of the dead. What is sown is perishable. What is raised is imperishable. It is sown in dishonor, and it is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, and it is raised in power. Skip down to verse 53. For this perishable body must put on the imperishable, and this mortal body must put on immortality. When the perishable puts on its imperishable, and the mortal puts on its immortality, then shall come to pass the saying that is written, Death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your sting? O death, where is your sting? Where is your victory? You think about that. We talked about that in our sermon last week, that what better time to be reminded of what promise we have about life after death. As we watch our bodies, just like verse 43 of 1 Corinthians 15 says, it's sown in dishonor. As we die, think about the dishonor that we go through in that. Many of us, our worst moments are going to be right before death, when our bodies are failing all around us. Just recently I had a friend pass away. And I think about how at the end that it was sad to look at the body, to know that maybe he wasn't even there anymore, that his mind was just so far gone, but that dishonor that the body had at that moment. What brought me hope is knowing that it's going to be raised in glory. That for whatever bad experience, just like Paul says, it's not worth comparing to the glory that's going to be revealed. No matter how bad it gets on this world, no matter how bad sickness and illness and pain tries to bring on us, the glory is so much better than what we experience. Like I said in verse 43, it is sown in weakness, but it is raised in power. These bodies, sure, they hit a peak. They can do some amazing things, and there's videos all over the internet to prove that. But ultimately, they all go the way of weakness. They all go the way of deterioration. We all have to experience our body slowly giving out on us and not being able to do the things that we used to do, one step at a time. But Paul says that it will die in weakness, but it'll raise in power. See, we are promised that we will be having a new body, that He will put on imperishable onto this body, so that we can receive that full adoption, so that we can be in God's presence, so that we can see the fullness of the glory of God. These are the promises that bring us hope. This is the glory that we look forward to. These are the things that give us hope in a time such as this. As we struggle with the world around us and the sufferings and the pain that goes on, this is the hope in which we were saved. This is the hope that will bring us through this. Is the hope of having that deeper experience of God's presence. That we one day will be face to face with Him. And just like it said earlier in Romans, that we'll be able to say to Him, Abba, Father. That we will be able to have that casualness of our relationship. That we will be with Him just as a small child is with their father. We look forward to that. Not only that, we look forward to creation being renewed We look forward for creation to be set free from the corruption of human beings and the sin that we've brought onto it. We look forward to creation not having to constantly pull us down and fight against the things that we do. Just like it talked about in the garden of the thorns and thistles. We've all experienced how creation is work, it's hard, it's difficult. But we want to get back to that day like in the garden where we can look at it and say, that is good. That corruption is done away with. And then finally, we look forward to have our adoption finalized. We look forward to that day when the short-term experience we have through the Spirit of that adoption, that feeling of God's presence, when we have that short term of that, of the Spirit, we look forward to that day when we have the fullness of it, when we have a body to go along with that Spirit, when we have the imperishable to go along with the perishable. We look forward to the redemption of our bodies so that we can experience that renewal of the creation and that fullness of God's presence. These are the things that we put our hope in. We put our hope in what comes after death. We put our hope in what God has promised us that He will do in our lives if we are faithful to Him. As we go through these difficult times, maybe they get worse. Maybe it's like they say that if we do everything right, you'll look at it and say, well, why do we do it? That's the one we hope for. We hope for that outcome. But whatever happens, we look beyond this life. That's what we put our hope in. We put our hope in what God has promised us. You know, if you're out there and you don't understand how we can hope in such a thing. See, we believe that Jesus Christ was a real man. We believe that He lived a perfect life, that He lived loving and showing God's love to everyone that He encountered. And we believe that He died a cruel death on the cross to show His love in one true act of sacrifice. And we, more than that, even believe that He was raised. That He experienced the first of this being raised to an imperishable body. You know, it's interesting when you think about that imperishable body that He was mistaken for a gardener. Even people that had been around Him, His body was different in such a way that they weren't exactly sure what they were looking at. But yet it was very real. That is the Jesus that we believe is alive today. We believe that He was raised as the first fruits of that redemption of our bodies that we talked about. And it's that belief that gives us the hope beyond the grave. It's His resurrection that gives us hope for everyone that has passed away will experience that one day. Everyone will be raised. And if we obey Him, we'll be raised to this glory and this presence of God that we just talked about. If you want to know more about this, please reach out to myself, reach out to the Alvaton Church, reach out to one of the elders, whoever it is. We would be glad to talk to you about the hope that we have. Or if you're a Christian, and let's be honest, this time is tough, and you want us to pray for you, you want us to do something to help you through the difficulties that you're facing with this coronavirus, we would more than be willing to help. Just let us know whatever it is that you need. As always, we look forward to the time when we'll all be back together. And in the meantime, may God watch over you and protect you through this difficult time.